While waiting at a red light, I was struck by a speeding Maserati. My wife and daughter died on the spot, and I fell into a coma. The owner of the car was the daughter of a wealthy family, and under her family's influence, I somehow became the one at fault. After saying goodbye to a friend, I was driving home with my wife and daughter, laughing and enjoying our time together. Suddenly, a deafening roar approached like lightning, followed by a massive crash that sent me spinning. In that instant, I realized I was in an accident. Just before everything went dark, I saw a Maserati, driven by a frantic young woman, with a similarly frantic young man beside her. Clearly, they were on drugs. When I woke up 2 weeks later, I felt weak and confused, repeatedly calling out my wife and daughter's names. A doctor informed me that they had died in the accident. Hearing this shattered me. I stared blankly at the ceiling, heartbroken, tears silently streaming down my face. Shortly after, the police arrived. Their first words stunned me. They said I was the cause of the accident. How could that be? I'd been waiting at the light when a speeding Maserati hit us, and I saw the two drugged-up young people in it. I kept saying it was impossible, probably appearing insane to everyone around me. The police presented surveillance footage showing aim at a red light when a silver BMW sped in and collided with it. My mouth dropped in disbelief as I recognized my silver BMW in the video. Fake. The video is fake, I shouted, refusing to accept it. The officers showed me more evidence, all pointing to me as the perpetrator. I started to doubt my own memories, but quickly dismissed that thought. I was always caught if Vasper drank and drove, never sped, especially with my wife and daughter in the car. I was certain someone had tampered with the evidence. They had staged the accident, swapping the roles of the parties involved, turning me from a victim into the offender. This was a masterful deception. Whoever did this had powerful connections. My fists clenched with rage as I realized these people had taken my wife and daughter from me, and then turned the blame back on me. I didn't argue anymore. Instead, I calmly asked, "Who did I hit?" The officer seemed surprised by my change in tone and replied softly, "Camille, the daughter of the Williams family." I questioned, "The wealthy Williams family?" He nodded. I slowly closed my eyes. "No wonder, son. The deceased is the young master of the Miller family." My eyes snapped open as I finally understood why the Williams family was going to such lengths. Clearly, the Williams family wanted to shift the blame for the Miller heirs' death onto me, avoiding a feud with the Millers while uniting against me. The scapegoat. What a clever strategy. I realized that no matter what I did, it would be futile. The Williams family had likely made arrangements across the board, but I couldn't appear to calm. An unusual calmness might trigger their desire to eliminate me. For these powerful families, it's standard to crush threats in the cradle. I resisted at first, gradually became numb, and ultimately accepted my fate in despair. In the end, I was sentenced to 3 years in prison. When I heard the verdict, my heart felt no emotion. I simply took a deep breath. 3 years. After that, I would show the Williams family that even a cornered rabbit would bite. And it would hurt. But I overlooked one thing: I might not survive those 3 years. On my first day in prison, I was attacked. If I hadn't reacted quickly, I would have had my neck snapped. I thought calmly, it might not be the Williams family's doing, but rather the Millers seeking revenge for their son. I didn't dwell on who wanted me dead. I just knew I couldn't sit idly by. Otherwise, I wouldn't make it through the 3 years. After a series of observation, I started my plan. I needed to set up several safety measures. First, I got familiar with the guard in charge of our section and had a friend send him some money. Perhaps it was lucky timing. The guard's family had just faced a major illness and needed funds. This gave me my first layer of protection. Then, through the guard, I obtained some favors and connected with the leader among the prisoners in my area, gaining a second layer of protection. At the same time, I began purposefully befriending people with special skills, securing a third layer of protection. With these 3 layers, I felt a bit more at ease. Perhaps the Millers realized they shouldn't act hastily or sensed that it was difficult to kill me in prison, so they refrained from making any reckless moves. I always felt like there were eyes watching me, like a snake waiting for the right moment to strike. So I remained vigilant, understanding that physical fitness was crucial. I worked out diligently and even learned some self-defense techniques from a skilled inmate. Time passed slowly, and due to my good behavior, I was eventually granted a sentence reduction. 2.5 years later, I was released. As I walked out of the prison gate, I saw several cars parked outside, resembling unlicensed taxis. However, I could sense that something was off. There was a heavy atmosphere of menace. Those drivers were clearly not ordinary people. I knew the Millers were likely planning to make their move, probably on my way home. A middle-aged man with a dark complexion approached me and asked if I needed a ride. After a few exchanges, I slapped him hard across the face. "Oh damn, why don't you just rob me?" He was about to let it go and soon we were in a scuffle. Within moments, police sirens blared. Both of us were taken to the station. Since the situation was serious, the police mediated, and we opted for a private settlement, with me paying him $1,000. Once everything was resolved, I made an excuse to use the restroom and slipped out the back door of the police station. I didn't go home or to a friend's place. Then, I checked into a hotel in a complicated urban village. Besides my old, abandoned house, I had virtually nothing left. The company I had worked hard to build had been swallowed by the Millers in my first year in prison. But it didn't matter anymore. Even if I were immensely wealthy now, it wouldn't help. I just wanted revenge. Revenge against the Williams family. The next day, I checked out of the hotel and went to a small private cosmetic surgery clinic, where I underwent some minor facial procedures. Looking at the slightly unfamiliar reflection in the mirror, Andrew's smile crept onto my lip. For nearly 3 years, I had awaited this day. The Williams family was powerful. But no matter how powerful they were still vulnerable to the rules of open fire and hidden arrows. 3 days later, I received a folder delivered by a courier, containing documents forged by a friend. Late at night, I arrived at a secluded spot and climbed into an old van parked on the roadside. Inside, a shifty-eyed man named Bald. He was skilled at tracking and gathering information. I had saved his life in prison. He had been out for 6 months, and had been gathering intel on the Williams family for me. I opened the folder Bald had given me and began to browse through it. I had to admit, he had real talent. Bald looked at me and said quietly, then doubtfully took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kinds of emotional videos. But you can't take on the Williams family alone." I smiled slightly and replied, "Whether I can or not, I'll only know once I try." After saying that, I took out an envelope from my backpack containing $20. Then Ashley took the phone away. "Remember, you don't know me, and I don't know you." Dante Bald was about to say something, but I interrupted him. I waved the folder in my hand and said, "Thing is worth a life." Bald didn't speak again. He just sighed deeply. After parting ways with him, I took a cab to a bar and saw a Maserati parked outside. That was Camille's new ride. You could say Camille was a devoted fan of Maserati. A bottle smashed in front of me. A harsh male voice followed. "You country bumpkin. What are you staring at? Can you afford to pay for that?" I turned my head and saw 4 young people, clearly drunk. My gaze locked onto a tall woman in a bright red dress. She was the one responsible for my loss, Camila. Bam! I was kicked to the ground by a strong force. A young man loomed over me and shouted, "I'm talking to you." Then he snatched a bottle from his companion and smashed it over my head. Blood flowed silently down my face. Next, 4 of them surrounded me, starting to punch and kick. I let out a roar, enduring the pain as I stood up and pinned Camille down. My eyes red like a beast ready to devour its prey. At the same time, my right hand reached for my waist. I arrived at an inconspicuous little house and took out a key to unlock the door. Inside were various instruments. I had previously commissioned several people to gather them in batches, originally intending to do some research to pass the time. I never expected they would come in handy now. I splashed cold water on my face and began preparing a surprise for the Williams family. Day 1. Day 2. Day 3. On the 4th night, I finally completed my gift, a large bomb. I walked to a wall adorned with photos of everyone in the Williams family. I marked an X over the picture of a young man named Clyde, Camille's younger brother and the family's favorite child. I placed the bomb in my backpack, locked the door, and headed in one direction. According to the information Bald provided, Clyde had a strong mother fixation and was keeping a beautiful widow who resembled his mother. Every Saturday, and today happened to be Saturday, I avoided cameras as much as possible, crossing street after street until I arrived at an old neighborhood where the widow lived. Following the route Bald drew for me, I evaded security and camera. Arriving at a Ferrari parked nearby, I checked the license plate, and it matched Bald's description perfectly. Seeing no one around, I carefully attached the bomb under the car and connected it to the ignition. Once Clyde started the car, the bomb would be triggered. After double-checking to ensure everything was in order, I retraced my steps out of the neighborhood. I found a quiet spot out of sight of the camera, lit a cigarette, and waited patiently for the fireworks to begin. Around 6 o'clock, a loud explosion woke many people from their dream. Numerous cars blared their alarms in response. Chaos became the theme of that moment. I smiled slightly and turned to leave. Not far into my escape, I heard the wail of siren. News broke online. Ferrari in the Iowa community was destroyed by a bomb. There were no survivors in the car, and the victim was suspected to be the young master of the Williams family. Images from the scene accompanied the report. I didn't pay attention to that. Instead, I sat before the graves of my wife and daughter and softly said, "Forgive me for coming to see you only now. When I returned from my trip, I always brought you gifts. After such a long absence, I cowed and come empty-handed, starting with the young master of the Williams family as an appetizer. Don't worry. He'll send each member of the Williams family down to apologize to you one by one." After a pause, I added, "You probably wouldn't like me to become this way, but since you're gone, no one is watching over me. Let me go a little crazy. Isn't life about fighting for one's breath? I can't imagine how the Williams family feels at this moment, but I assume it's not good. I suspect they wouldn't think it was me. After all, I'm just a small fry, perhaps already forgotten by them. The only ones still thinking of me in this world seem to be the Millers, who wanted me dead." I gently kissed the photos of my wife and daughter on the tombstone and turned to leave. It was time for the next target. The Williams family gathered, their faces grave, as Clyde's mother sobbed softly. "What happened?" Old man Williams asked in a deep voice. Carlton replied. "Clyde was impulsive, but not one to stir trouble. As far as I know, he had no enemies. Our family has prioritized harmony in recent years. So we don't yet know who did this." Old man Williams inquired again. "What does the police say?" Carlton answered. "The situation. The police have set up a special task force with a deadline to solve the case. Preliminary assessments suggest it was a homemade bomb. They suspect the culprit possesses strong chemical knowledge and practical skill." Old man Williams's tone turned icy. "Review everyone who's had a conflict with our family, no matter how small, and send your men out to investigate each one. Carlton's eyes gleamed coldly. I didn't concern myself with the Williams family's reaction. Instead, I became a water delivery worker. I repeated the same delivery routine daily, waiting quietly for my chance. The target this time was Camille's older brother. I worked diligently, patiently awaiting the opportunity. Cecil lived in the upscale Fengi housing community, which fell under my responsibility. Normally, a neighborhood had drinking water supplied to each unit, and with a water purifier installed, there was no need for delivery. Though what if there was a problem with the water? Half a month later, right among Fengi housing residents, the staff from the water plant responsible for direct drinking water had mistakenly opened the wrong valve during maintenance, causing non-potable water to mix into the drinking supply. The news spread rapidly, and nearly everyone knew by the next day. The demand for water delivery skyrocketed, including Cecil. I carried 2 buckets of water and knocked on Cecil's door. After dropping off the water, I left in a blind spot from the camera. I changed out of my delivery uniform into regular clothes and slipped out of the community. The next day, the news broke that Cecil and his wife had died from poisoning. They had succumbed to arsenic poisoning, likely triacid arsenic, commonly known as rat poison. The series of deaths in the Williams family alerted many to an unusual situation. People were curious about who had the audacity to act against them. Many with grievances against the Williams family relished the news. Unlike Clyde's sudden death, which left them in the dark, Cecil's death made it clear to both the Williams family and the police that the killer was a water delivery worker. But all the information about that water delivery worker was fake, and the surveillance footage was tightly controlled. The key was that this person was taciturn, with few colleagues interacting with him. All they knew was that he was male. Everyone understood that the powerful Williams family had encountered a ruthless adversary. Even more absurdly, the Williams family had no idea when they had crossed paths with this person or who he was. With the deaths of Clyde and Cecil, Old Man Williams was furious, his screams laced with deep-seated hatred. At that moment, the old steward rushed in, flustered, holding an envelope, which he handed to Old Man Williams. "We found this while cleaning the yard." Old Man Williams took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a photo of a car accident with for blood red characters written on it, "Blood for blood." Old Man Williams furrowed his brow, studying it for a long time without drawing any conclusion, before showing the photo to everyone. Camille was momentarily stunned, then screamed in terror. "Laurent?" Old Man Williams asked. Camille trembled as she replied. The Old Man Williams demanded. Carlton explained seriously. About 3 years ago, Elaine was driving with Chad when they crashed into a BMW waiting at a red light. Elaine was seriously injured and hospitalized, while Chad died on the spot. The BMW had a family of 3. The man was severely injured, and his wife and daughter died instantly. Both Elaine and Chad had been using drugs at the time. With our collaboration with the Millers reaching a critical point, I had someone switch the identity, making the BMW the culprit. The Miller family's hatred was redirected. The driver was sentenced to 3 years. He should be out by now, but this method doesn't seem like something he would do. Since we know who it is, let him pay in blood. He tossed the photo aside and left. Everyone exchanged glances and quickly began to take action. Once everyone who had left, Camille collapsed to the ground, her body trembling slightly. She knew it would soon be her turn. Previous, she had boasted to her friends about this incident, driving under the influence, killing 2 people, and severely injuring another, yet coming away unscathed, and only the Williams family could pull off something like that. She had always thought that this matter ended with my imprisonment. Little did she know, it was just the beginning. She and her family had unwittingly released a demon. Both the police and the Williams family were frantically searching for me. Unfortunately for them, they were destined to find nothing. They could never imagine that I had already become a different person. After taking care of Cecil, I decided to hold off for a while. On one hand, I wanted Camille and the Williams family to truly experience fear. On the other hand, family's defenses were tightening, making it hard to find suitable opportunities. One day, Bald suddenly contacted me, claiming to have made a significant discovery and wanted to meet. I furrowed my brow, considering the possibility of Bald being compromised. From the time we met to our interactions in prison, our relationship had always been discreet. We even created some conflicts to give others the impression that we didn't get along. I felt that the likelihood of the Williams family knowing about Bald was very low, and they certainly wouldn't use him as a trap. At the agreed time, I arrived at a relatively secluded spot, where the same old van awaited. I got into the car and saw Bald giving me a thumbs up. "Dante, I rarely admire anyone, but you're definitely one of them." Bald looked at me as if he had discovered a new continent. I understood his reaction. Normally, I was easygoing and carried a strong scholarly vibe, looking every bit like a bookworm. But now, I was a demon with full power unleashed. I looked at Bald, my tone stern than I say before. "You don't know me, and I don't know you." Bald chuckled. "Tante, I know you mean well, But that's your perspective. If it were up to me, you'd take me along. I replied firmly. That's a death sentence. Bald shrugged it off. Death sentence? Without you, it'd be dead already. For someone like me who spends time in prison, death might actually be a form of liberation. I still shook my head resolutely. Bald didn't argue further but said, You must know Clyde has a strong mother complex, right? He even supports a widow who looks a lot like his mother. Heh. I've been following Aggie, the matriarch of the Williams family, for a while. And guess what I found out? Bald handed me a stack of photos. As I took a look, I was instantly stunned. Bald grinned. Surprising. I was shocked when I found out. The son has a mother complex, but who would have thought the mother has a son complex? Secretly keeping a little toy boy who looks just like her son. It's ridiculous. I suddenly didn't know what to say, feeling that the Williams family was truly chaotic. Bald handed me another paper with an address on it. The little toy boy lives here. Aggie usually goes to see him once or twice a week, but she hasn't been since you did what you did. I think she's about to crack. I nodded, just when I was thinking about how to proceed with my next plan. Bald presented me with a golden opportunity. When I parted ways with Bald, I asked him to keep gathering information for me, but I had already decided in my heart not to contact him again. I didn't want him to get deeper into this mess, compared to me, who had already fallen into the abyss the moment I killed Clyde. Bald still had a long way to go. In the following week, I gathered detailed information about the little toy boy. I had to say, Abel looked a lot like Clyde. No wonder Aggie was smitten. Abel was living a carefree life and was quite reckless, involved with several girls at once. He also had a habit of online shopping, which provided me with an opportunity. One evening, I put on a delivery uniform, wearing a mask and hat, and took an empty packet. I knocked on Abel's door. Hello. Delivery. It wasn't long before Abel opened the door, reeking of alcohol. Without even looking at me, he took the package from my hands and turned to close the door. I quickly stepped into the room and shut the door behind me. Abel frowned, ready to curse, but froze when he saw the sharp knife I pulled out. I gestured for Abel to sit on the couch. He complied obediently. Big brother, don't be impulsive. We can talk money. I didn't reply but took out a syringe and jabbed it into his thigh. Abel screamed and then trembled, asking, Big brother, what? I softly replied, a kind of poison. His face went pale. Big brother. This I continued. The poison won't take effect immediately, but it will explode in 12 hours. By then, you'll be rotting away, a puddle of blood. So you have 12 hours to help me with something. At that moment, I caught a whiff of urine. I frowned, surprised that this little toy boy was so cowardly. Abel trembled and asked, Big brother, what do you want me to do? I said, Get Aggie here. No problem. Abel didn't hesitate at all. I cautioned, Don't show any signs. Abel made an okay gesture. You can count on me. Then, I witnessed the real side of this little toy boy. His continuous flirtation and disgusting coquetry made me uncomfortable. After Abel hung up the phone, he looked at me with pitiful eye. I shuddered and quickly told him to change clothes. At 9 o'clock that night, there was a knock on the door. I hurriedly hid behind the door and signaled to Abel to open it. Abel took a deep breath, adjusted his state, and slowly opened the door. As soon as the door opened, a beautiful woman threw herself on Abel, as if biting him. Abel's gaze turned to me. I motioned for her to continue, then took out my phone and found a good angle. This live sex scene was very exciting and made for great material. When it was all over, Aggie, completely naked, lay panting on top of Abel. It must be said that Aggie took very good care of herself. At nearly 60 years old, she looked only in her 40s. And her figure was also very well maintained. Flap, flap, flap. I applauded. Aggie suddenly shivered, grabbed a nearby piece of clothing to cover her private area, and with a frown, Who are you? I didn't answer her. Then, I said to Abel, Ugh, without any hesitation. Abel tugged Aggie. I took out a rope and tied her up in a full body bind. Then tied Abel up as well. Who are you? I smiled slightly and asked, "Did you receive the photos I sent?" Aggie's pupils dilated. "Suddenly it's you?" Then, Aggie shook her head. "Impossible." In the next moment, Aggie's expression changed. Her face filled with disbelief. "No." Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kinds of emotional videos. You had plastic surgery." I gave Aggie a thumbs up. "Smart." Aggie's expression darkened and she asked, "Are you a chemistry student?" I laughed and said, "Second degree." Aggie sighed and said, "No wonder." Then asked, "When will you kill me?" I looked out the window and said, "After your daughter come." "Don't." Aggie had only spoken 2 words when I stuffed a towel in her mouth. Then, I used Aggie's phone to mimic Aggie's tone and sent a WeChat message to Camille. "Hurry to Building 14. Unit 2. 606 at Yenkang Yuan. Mom has something to tell you." Not long after, Camille replied with the okay. An hour and a half later, an ox sounded at the door. I opened the door and dragged Camille into the room. Upon seeing the situation in the room, Camille's face turned pale, and she collapsed to the ground, her body trembling violently. I looked at her and smiled. "This should be our 3rd meeting." Camille's face showed a look of confusion. I explained. "First time was during the car accident when I saw you and Chad. The second time was at the bar entrance, when the 4 of you beat me up. And this is the 3rd. I didn't mean to." Camille, tears gushing out, her voice trembling severely. I spoke softly. "The point isn't whether you meant to or not, but that you made me lose my wife and daughter. That you turned me from a victim into a perpetrator." Camille opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. I continued. "In the eyes of your Williams family, I'm just an ant that can be crushed at will. But you've been so high and mighty for too long. You've forgotten that even an ant can shake a tree." After I finished, I tied Camille up and stuffed a towel in her mouth, smiling as I said, "I invited you here to watch a big show." I took out a syringe and explained. "ENS is highly concentrated nicotine I extracted. If I inject it into someone's body, no matter how strong that person is, they will die within a few minutes." Camille struggled violently, roaring in agony. I patted her face and said, "Don't worry. It's not your turn yet." I stood up and walked over to Aggie, whose face was filled with terror, and I jabbed the needle into Aggie's neck. Camille and Abel passed out immediately. Then, I used Camille's phone to send a video of Aggie and Abel to the internet, along with some shocking text, and I tagged several influential figures who stop at nothing for traffic. I believe this was enough to stir up another storm, making the Williams family, who were already in the spotlight, the most attention-grabbing presence in the city. No doubt, the storm had arisen, even though the Williams family had used all their means to try to suppress this matter. They couldn't stop people from spreading, communicating, and discussing it in private. I paid no attention to this and left with Camille. With Aggie and Camille missing, it wouldn't be long before it was discovered here. After hiding Camille, I went to the Williams family alone. When I saw the old man of the Williams family in Carlton, I could feel their suppressed murderous intent and fury. They are the richest in the city, the kind of figures who could cause the city to tremble with a single stamp of their feet. And I am but an ant. Unfortunately, the ant had turned their world upside down. "Why do you dare to come here?" Carlton roared, raising his hand to signal the bodyguards to take me down. I remained calm, buttoning my shirt slowly. Everyone froze on the spot, their eyes filled with horror. I smiled slightly. "Think all the DC of the Williams family should be gathered here during this time. You want to go down with me? After all, I only have this stinky skin left in this world." The old man of the Williams family waved everyone away and asked me, "What is your purpose in coming here?" I laughed and said, "I just want to ask, who was behind that incident years ago?" Carlton said coldly with a gloomy expression. I nodded my head, looking at him calmly. "Then I'll ask you to commit suicide." "Impossible," Carlton roared. I placed my thumb on the switch but otherwise, I can only set off a huge firework here, taking everyone here to mourn for my wife and daughter. Carlton's expression stumbled for a moment. I slowly walked up to Carlton, suddenly pulled out a syringe, and pierced it hard into his chest. Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kinds of emotional videos." Carlton tried to say something, but then he collapsed on the ground, and soon he was silent. I turned to look at the fierce Mr. Williams, and gave a faint smile, asking, "Mr. could I borrow a BMW?" Williams waved his hand, and a middle-aged man handed me a set of car keys. I took the keys and left, with no one daring to stop me. I drove the car out of the parking lot. I thought there would be police everywhere outside, but it was empty. I didn't expect that the Williams family hadn't called the police, which made things much easier. I went to the cemetery, chatted with my wife and daughter for a while, and then left. I had one last thing to do. I knew that the police were searching for me everywhere. Perhaps the Miller family was too. The reason I didn't point the gun at the Miller family was that although they were not clean, they could be considered victims to some extent. Leaving the cemetery, I drove to a very secluded place in a BMW with a changed license plate. There, a Maserati was parked. In the car, Camille's face was filled with despair. I strapped the explosives onto Camille's body and securely tied her to the driver's seat of the Mercedes, whispering in her ear, "You stopped the car at the same intersection where the accident happened. I'll send you to join your family right now," already in a state of collapse. Camille nodded repeatedly without any sign of resistance. And I saw the Mercedes Benz stop at the exact spot where I'd stopped back then, and noticed there were no other vehicles around. I suddenly pressed the accelerator. The BMW shot forward like an arrow, crashing hard into the back of the Mercedes. "Ben, since you all think it was me who caused the accident back then, I'll show you that it really was." As my consciousness started to fade, I whispered to myself, "Eileen, Macy, I'm coming to join you."